And welcome to another episode of Patriots 4th and 2. Derek Haven, Steve Bales-Jerry, we're your host as always. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about not only the Patriots roster, but what we are thinking about for free agency. And then next week, we'll get into our Combine preview, which we're very much looking forward to as we dive into one of Steve's and my favorite times of the year, which is the draft season. So before we do any of that, as always, Steve, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing great. Heading off for eye surgery in the morning. So next
It's fun
time you
getting
see
older,
me,
isn't it?
yeah. Next time you see me, I'll be seeing you better. So
There you go. There you go. I just want to wish our fearless leader and good friend Ian Logue a happy wedding anniversary. Also, same as mine, actually, which is ironic. But I just want to give a shout out to Russ Goldman. I want to tell everybody, please do subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, Patriots 4th and 2. And if you could give us a like or leave a review on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, it keeps us high on the podcast ranking so the Patriots fans can find us. So, Steve, good luck on the eye surgery. All right. I'm sure I can think of some stupid ass dad joke by the end of the show. I'll work on that. Before we get into everything, the off season is so interesting. And you and I were talking on the phone earlier, as we do, if not daily, every other day.
several times a day at times.
Yep. I had sent you the link to Chris Long's latest podcast where he had Drake May on. And, usually, so for one, Chris Long just seems like such a cool dude. And he has the Green Light Pod. And I sent you the link on Apple. But, if you don't have an Apple, I'm sure it's available on whatever. But he was a really good player, high-level prospect, obviously, had a really great career. I think he's almost even a better analyst than a player, which is pretty high praise because he was a really good player, but he just has such a nice, calming, he keeps things light and he really just goes ahead and makes things easy to digest, from an audio level and kind of break things down. I'm not, obviously people who listen to this show, probably listen to several other, sports podcasts and sometimes it gets a little bit too in the weeds. Sometimes it's not enough. I feel like we like to keep it nice, right in the middle. But Chris obviously played in the game, was in the trenches, literally and figuratively. I just felt like his conversation with Drake May, which was about 30 minutes long, Steve, I sent it to you when we talked, and I felt like it was a good listen. And I think that if anyone wants to, I don't want you to click off now and listen to the rest of the show, but afterwards, if you're taking a drive, it was definitely worth a
About 20
listen.
minutes. Yep.
Yeah, and Drake just seems like such a cool dude. I think the Patriots have a guy that's leading their team with the right head on their shoulders.
Yeah, it was a very good podcast. I listened to that after you sent me the link, and like you say, Chris Long is just like one of those guys that he doesn't have to impress anybody, with his hot takes or whatever. He just tells it like it is, and he has a manner of speaking that gets the guest wanting to talk to him more.
Mm-hmm.
That's the perfect thing, right?
Yeah.
So,
he's funny. He's smart. He has a knowledge of the game, not only as a player, but now as an analyst where he works on, CBS on the NFL and inside the NFL or whatever, and has worked with Belichick closely on multiple times and has done a couple different things. His brother played in the NFL. So he has a really interesting kind of, I think he does a really good job of kind of toting that line as a former player and analyst. I feel like he's very similar to Greg Olson, which probably sounds like pretty high praise, but I think, the trendy thing I didn't think this is where the show was going to start off of, but we can just talk about it for a second. But like, I think the trendy thing for a lot of sports, not just football, has been former players being analysts, whether that's broadcasters and commentators during the game, doing like color or whatever, or halftime shows or after the game or whatever. I think that there are some players who have really thrived at it. Ryan Clark, a good example, who Chris Long worked with on the CW on CBS and everything else like that. Chris Long again, because they're not afraid to say anything, and I feel like that's where some of those lines are blurred because some of those players are afraid to say things. And they don't want to offend one of their friends or one of their coaches or somebody they played under or whatever. And I feel like Chris does a really good job of kind of toting that line where, as my father always told me, be firm but fair, and I feel like they do a good job of that.
They do. And again, I thought it was really good. He got Drake May talking, and I liked how he put him at ease because a couple of times he was like, "So what was your call here? Talk me through this play."
Yep.
And and then that's a perfect way because now the guy is in his element. He telling you exactly how it played out, and because Drake he's a really good guy, like you said, but he's also kind of a quiet guy. And, the way to bring that out of him is, something like that. Or when he made him laugh, when he talked about how serious he was when he first came to the Patriots and his brothers were trying so hard to rip him, on the side there. And it got a good laugh out of him and myself as well when I was listening to it. So that was really good. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and then May mentioned getting to meet Coach Belichick. Obviously, Drake's connection with UNC at Chapel Hill and Bill's connection there and everything else. And then kind of everything else. I just thought the whole episode was worth listening to. For what it's worth, I mean, there's a few podcasts that I really, really like. For people who are listening, just to plug a few, like I love listening to Mike Diabate, our Locked On Patriots friends, our friend. I love listening to Patriots Unfiltered because I've been friends with those guys for 20 years.
They do a great job.
Of course. And then Evan Lazar and Alex Barth, and Alex is on 98.5 too. Do Catch 22. Aside, our friend Claire does a great job on the Claire podcast. I like Chris Long's Greenlight Pod. I also, why am I blanking? There's one more I was going to mention.
Well, I like the one that Tom Curran and
Phil Perry do.
Yeah, I like that one too. I listen to it.
I love Phil Perry, dude. Such a good dude.
Yeah.
He's so annoying because not only do I love his insight, he's good looking and he just is really articulate. It's really frustrating. It's like, dude, you got it all.
Well, I mean, Tom calls him the senator, right? For a reason.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. No, he's got it going. Okay. Sorry, my dog in the background is.
Yeah, I have one right beside me that's doing the same thing.
Sorry about that. My dog is. So let's just give a little like inside football here before we jump into everything. We feed my dog with this weighted Kong. It's like this, the big Kong, shell, and it's weighted, and you fill it up, and then she kind of knocks it around in her little crate, and she she's, the most food-driven dog I've ever seen in my entire life, and she just started smacking it around. I'm like, dude, you knocked that thing around, and that thing was gone a while ago, but she can't stop it. So, look, so anyways, I don't know where you want to start, Steve. I guess, like I said, we kind of wanted to give a shout out to a couple of podcasts that we really like, and there are some good ones, and there's other ones too. And if anyone who's listening, obviously see our ads and whatever, you guys are more than welcome to reach out, because I download like 20 of them a week, and I don't listen to all of them, but every week, but I do listen to a little bit of everything and kind of see what guests are on or whatever. Rich Eisen's a good one. He's been a staple since I was a kid. I mean, him and Stuart Scott were. Steve Levy, I mean, some of my favorites. Growing up when Sports Center was still a thing. Before ESPN went sideways.
Well, Rich Eisen is, I think he's awesome.
He's incredible.
That's why I'm looking forward to, the combine and.
Oh yeah.
And then, how he does the draft, and, he does such a great job there. And it's not easy to talk for 3 days. You know what I mean?
And they're doing like 6-hour sets. Like, it's talk about you talk about just having like a Bigelow tea commercial waiting to happen. It's like, come on, man. Can someone get him some lemon tea and probably a stiff cocktail afterwards? Like, geez, come on, let's do it. But anyways, so, Steve, there's a lot to get into, and look, I want to preface this by saying, one more time, we are going to get to a lot of the prospects coming up, and we are going to analyze it, and as Mike Felger says, we'll circumcise the mosquito all the way to the draft. But free agency, Steve, is going to dictate a lot of what happens for the Patriots in the draft, because if you're looking at the Patriots roster, before we even get to the roster, which we are going to get to me, Steve, you really have two holes of your 53 on there, and that is starting quarterback and cornerback 1.
Yep.
Pretty much everything after that is a question mark. I put running back 1 on there with a slight asterisk. And I put center with a slight asterisk and right guard with a slight asterisk, because those 3 positions, you have Ramondre Stevenson, who you just gave some money to, who had a lot of fumbling issues, early, and really didn't have the best year. So I'm a little worried about him, but I still think he's going to be in the mix. No matter what happens at that position, he's going to be in the mix. Center with David Andrews, I mean, you could be worried if he's going to retire or not. As we've mentioned on the show previously, I think that him being at Mike Vrabel's press conference, to me, as an uninformed outsider, I felt like maybe that looked like him kind of giving his support and wanting to be there for his future coach for another year or two. That's kind of how I feel. And I know Michael Onwenu had a really rough year, and I put right guard with an asterisk because right guard's his best position, but I still think he's going to kind of bounce back, and I think he was fighting through a couple of different little things. So you really have cornerback 1 in Christian Gonzalez and quarterback Drake May in Sharpie, and everybody else, you're kind of waiting on. So I know we're going to talk about the roster, but before we do that, we have to get into the free agency. So, to me, who do you want to target to upgrade this Patriots roster moving forward this season?
Well, I mean, I looked at a couple of positions right off the bat, and it starts right with the offensive line. So if you're going to draft if you're going to pay free agent offensive linemen, because as you said to me earlier, I don't know if it was today or yesterday,
who knows?
Yeah. Because you were talking with somebody, there could be 4 new players in the offensive line, with the exception of Onwenu. I mean, let's call it what it is, right? So when I looked at tackles, um, I kind of think Ronnie Stanley's probably going to stay in Baltimore.
Can I?
But
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to cut you off. Can I just
Mhm.
say, for the record, I think that there's only going to be probably two new starters. I've heard three. I've heard four. I really do get the feeling David's going to stay there at center. I think and when he's going to be there, and I have a hard time believing that they're going to be able to replace three other positions 100%, like literally flip that room upside down. So I really do think it's only going to be two. So I just wanted to preface that before you kind of go into it, because and I want to hear what you want to say, obviously, and I'm sure it will be a good point, but I just feel like that needs to be said, because I keep hearing that how it's going to flip, and you and I have talked over the last couple shows about how we feel like the roster's going to be flipped by 50%, and I believe that, but at the same time, that's a really hard group to flip around, and good offensive linemen don't become available that often. It's really not that
no,
often that
and
they
and a
just
lot
show
of
up
it,
and whatever.
a lot of it's going to depend on how they feel about last year's two rookies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do they think Caden Wallace can be that guy, for right tackle? Do they believe Layden Robinson could be your starting guard? I mean,
What do they
if they
think of
believe
Antonio
that,
Mafi or Jake Andrews? I mean, I don't know what
yeah,
their style is.
right. So, I mean, I'm just looking at it. Look, we don't sit in the room with them, so we can't hear the conversations. But I'm just saying, if they decide, to make a clean sweep of things, and they're looking for a left tackle, which I think we both agree they need a left tackle.
Oh yeah. If Baltimore lets Ronnie Stanley go, I don't care. I don't care if the Patriots draft Will Campbell or not. You sign Ronnie Stanley and you want to draft Will Campbell too, fine.
Oh
Go
yeah,
for it. We'll find a spot for him. We can find a
yeah,
spot.
yeah.
But
Because
but
those are first world problems.
right, yeah.
It's having too many left tackles, because not many teams have that issue.
I think
Um,
Will Campbell could be an all-pro center, an all-pro guard, and a Pro Bowl tackle. I think the biggest question with him, which we'll get to next week, because he's been kind of a pretty he's been a pretty popular Patriots pick in mock drafts. Like Field Yates just had his latest mock draft on ESPN, and he had Will Campbell to the Patriots. And let's not forget, Field Yates worked for the Patriots. He worked for Mike Reese, and we know that not only does Mike Reese have an ear to the team, um, he he's more connected with more than anybody, and he also literally worked for the team. So to
yeah,
me, I wonder if
he
that's
when
there.
Mike says stuff, you kind of lean forward in the foxhole, as we used to say,
Yes.
because that is something you pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of times he doesn't say anything definitively. He'll just say, I'm kind of thinking, watch for this guy.
How many times have we joked about that on a Sunday column where all of a
Yeah,
sudden it's like usually 10 bullet points? Usually
yeah,
there's like one that's like
yep,
10A, 10B or whatever, but it's usually 10 bullet points. And it's like 7, and like it's a small paragraph. And the last paragraph's like, oh, by the way, this is his manager, and there's a connection because of this, and this is his agent, and that's why they're connected. And you're just kind of like, wait, what? It's like a throwaway comment.
yeah. Your
Like,
ear starts to going, whoa, hold on,
pay
back
attention.
up.
And Mike doesn't, and Mike, who by the way, best in the business, doesn't just throw things away. So the fact that he's done that in the past and whatever, but just he's always someone you got to pay attention to.
But anyway, yeah, if they let Ronnie Stanley walk, which I'm kind of doubting they do, um, but I would definitely kick the tires on that one and offer him, overpay him a little bit and see if he'd be willing to come here, because I think he is outstanding.
Well, and he's the kind of player, Steve, that you have to overpay, right? Because he's a veteran guy. He wants to win. as all the players do. All the players want to win, of course, but they also want to get paid, and they want to get paid the most. But there's not a whole lot of incentive to go to Foxborough right now until they build a better program. So they're going to have to overpay, and we get that. But at the same time, if Baltimore lets him go, they should do that, because that would buy you some time. If you don't want to go Will Campbell at number 4, maybe you go Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, whoever it is at number 4, and then you have Ronnie Stanley, and you take a guy in the second round and you try to develop him and see if it happens like that. But that is what you have to do. But the high end talent in free agency, you're going to have to go ahead and probably give a little extra money in the kitty too.
Oh, I think they're going to have to give a bunch extra.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I mean, if, and that's a big if he makes it to free agency, he probably won't be looking to come to New England. So in order to make that happen, you'd have to sweeten the pie for him quite a bit.
Sure.
But that being said, I mean, that would solve your left tackle issue. The other guy, if they want to explore that in free agency, because again, they have the money.
Trey Smith.
And the money isn't going to help you in the draft, So therefore, if you're looking at another guy, Larry Jackson.
Oh, okay. Different guy than I was thinking of. Okay.
Yes.
Trey Smith to me is a guard, and I've heard that name floating around a lot. And the only reason I even brought it up is because I think it's an interesting conversation, because it's like you're already paying Mike Onwenu $19 million. Do you want to have 2 guards that be making a crap ton of money when your tackles are an issue too, and you need to have money go to there? So go ahead and advocate for your guy.
Yeah, and I don't have an issue with if you have 2 high-paid guards if they're playing at the level that you're paying them. You know what I mean? Because if David Andrews decides to come back and he's the David Andrews we all know, that makes the middle of your line fantastic. You have a guy like Onwenu, you have a guy like Trey Smith, and David Andrews in the middle.
And Mike Onwenu. Yeah.
Yeah. It makes your line fantastic. So, and then if they believe Caden Wallace is going to be the guy, then by all means, that's fine. But I think that in that case, they would still bring in a veteran right tackle, maybe a guy that's on the back 9 of his career, and that's your insurance for.
I would just hope it's a better player than Chuks Okorafor. And look, I mean, I don't want to be a fraud here. I don't want to be a contrarian. You and I both like Chuks Okorafor for what he was. And he underperformed. It didn't work out. Okay, that's fine. Like, things don't work out sometimes. But we need a better player than that if you're going to do that as an insurance policy, because it just straight up didn't work out. I told you off air, I don't think I said this on last week's show, but I told you off air, I would roll with Caden Wallace at right tackle. I would go, assuming Andrews comes back at center, I would go David Andrews, Mike Onwenu, Caden Wallace on the right side of your line, and then I would hope that I can get Trey Smith or Ronnie Stanley on the left side, plug in the other one with something else, and then either take a Will Campbell or take another veteran. And you're not going to be able to fill all 5 positions. Like, it's not like a lickety split kind of thing. No. So I think you're going to have to take your lumps. So I'm like, screw it. Well, throw Caden Wallace on the right side and just say, hey, let's hope Doug Marrone, who's the new offensive line coach for the Patriots, is going to go ahead and be able to coach him up for, I guess, the best possible scenario for him. And if he can't figure it out, then, whatever, but it can't possibly be worse than the crap we saw last season. It can't possibly be worse.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm cautiously optimistic this year about the offensive line, because they're bringing in a guy. He's not Dante Scarnecchia, but he's damn good.
He's very good.
And that's Doug Marrone as an offensive line coach. I
I'm
mean,
not going
he's
to mention the name. I'm not going to mention the name, but I talked to you earlier offline that I spoke to a Patriots offensive lineman who is very excited, and there's a lot of buzz in that whole room about Marone coming in because they know about his reputation and about what he can do. So I think there's a lot of people in that building that are really excited. And Vrabel's style is in the trenches. You saw it in Tennessee. Vrabel's an old school guy. He wants his front seven to be a certain way. He wants his offensive line to be a certain way. He wants to run the ball. Now, that doesn't mean that he doesn't want to go ahead and throw the passing, have a passing game. But I'm just saying he believes in those old school fundamentals. And there's a lot of buzz in the building about Marone. They're excited about it.
oh, as it should be. I think he's considered one of the best offensive lineman coaches in the game today.
Yep. Yep.
And guys like him and Dante Scarnecchia, they bring out the very best. I mean, you and I, again, we talked about this offline, but how many times did the Patriots bring in an offensive lineman and everyone was like, who the heck is this guy, right?
Yep.
And the next thing you know, maybe he wasn't all pro, but, they did great jobs. I mean, Stephen Neal wasn't even a football player, I mean, and
He was a great wrestler.
Yeah. And he ended up being a really, really good football player, working with Scarnecchia.
Oh my God, that reminds me of another podcast. So you got Julian Edelman's podcast, Games with Names, had Rich Ornberger on, another former offensive lineman, also another wrestler. And he had a hilarious story about Randy Moss and him.
Yes.
So if you want to look up that, if anyone who's listening to the show wants to listen to that was freaking hilarious because Randy Moss
was awesome. That was
Randy
one of
Moss
the funniest.
called him coach, and he was so pumped because he's like, "Oh my God, Randy Moss has a nickname for me." And then Randy Moss literally found out that he was a player. He didn't realize that Rich Ornberger was an actual player on the team. And that whole thing, that whole exchange was so funny, man. Julian's another guy, man, does a really good job with being a former player, good analyst. He's able to go ahead and make fun of things, tries to be, down to earth and whatever. And oh man, that was really, really good listening.
Yeah, that was funny. But again, Rich Ornberger, another one of those guys, they bring him in. He played real well for them. I can think of others. I mean, even, you look at some of the guys they drafted highly that were panned by people. What's our big German friend there?
Vollmer?
Yes, Sebastian Vollmer.
Yeah.
He wasn't very highly thought of, and I think they took him in the second or third round.
It was the second round because it was 2009 because it was one of the years it was the year they had 4 second-round draft picks.
And he turned out quite well for them.
Who's much older than me and in incredibly good shape after his playing career. I mean, look at Logan Mankins. I want to say he came out of I think it was Arkansas, I want to say. And he was a left tackle in Arkansas, and he transitioned to a guard and obviously was an all-pro and then went over to Tampa Bay. Of course, one of the guys I would have loved to get a ring. Somehow missed that window. It was literally just that perfect window of time.
And he talk about tough.
Oh, geez.
I mean, didn't he play a whole season with a torn ACL?
Torn ACL, yep. Yep. He had a left. He had his left knee had a torn ACL. It was the 2007 season.
Yep. And that is a tough individual, right there.
Or no, wait, I'm trying to think what year that was.
I didn't think it was 2007, but
no, I was thinking of Phillip Rivers because the Patriots played the Chargers in the divisional round
in the AFC Championship.
Oh, it was championship? Okay. And Phillip Rivers also had a torn ACL, and I gave him
played the whole game.
Credit for that. Ton of credit for that. I mean, he put a brace on, and he was going, and he was a competitor, man. But yeah, no, I can't remember the year Mankins played on it, but yeah, no, he definitely played a whole season on it.
Mm. But
So
that's why I think that Doug Marrone will get the very best out of whoever they have, but they do need help at left tackle, and that was the reason I was looking at left tackles, because if there's a couple of guys out there, you can spend that money on a guy like a left tackle if one becomes available, because the money you can't use it in the drafts.
no, but
So
so here's the thing though, Steve, is like the Patriots, like as we started the show, they have a lot of needs and they have a lot of money to spend, and they have to spend it on something. So they also are going to have to overpay in order to fill those needs. And no, they're not going to be able to go ahead and do it all in one off season. It's not going to be a fix. It doesn't even be a couple of years ago where they're spending money and filling all these things. We saw firsthand. You can spend $250 million if you want to, but that doesn't mean it's going to go ahead and solve your problems. So we have to see what what happens with that. I guess just to kind of move things forward a little bit. Um, who else on the offensive line, if there's anyone, do you have to mention, or is there any other player that you want to bring up?
well, those were the three guys that I was looking at, because I was looking in terms of kind of big money kind of guys, and that's
Yeah.
what I based the top players that I'm looking at.
So for me, real quickly, and I'll be real quick about this. For me, real quickly, I would say, look, obviously quarterback, you're set. Running back, there's a couple of guys that you could potentially bring in. I think that between Stevenson and Gibson, I think that you have a good tandem there, but it's a very deep running back class that we're going to get to at some point, probably in the next week or two. And there's a lot of good running backs. I'm sure Drake May is going to be advocating for his guy from UNC. If you haven't watched him, you should. Tight end, I think, is interesting. Receiver, T. Higgins is a big one. They're
Well,
they haven't
I
officially.
listed three possible wide receivers that I would like to see them
So
possibly.
let's put a pin in that for 10 seconds, and we'll circle back, go over that, and then we'll go to break, and then we'll go to the roster. But so obviously receivers, a big thing. The offensive line we spent a lot of time on. Defensive line, I think that the most interesting thing to me, because of what we talked about with Mike Vrabel, is how he transforms the offensive and defensive lines, what kind of body types, what kind of guys that he likes, because I know where he wants to build, and we know what kind of guys that he liked in Tennessee. So, like, how does that work? How's Christian Barmore's health, etc.? What's that? Jawan Bentley. I thought he was sorely missed last year. Well, is he in Mike Vrabel's mind for this year, 2025? I don't know. I think that they need to get a veteran corner and draft a corner and go ahead and play someone off Christian Gonzalez. That I think that Kyle Duggar had an ankle injury. Peppers had the off field stuff. Are they able to rebound? You saw Pettis, I thought, kind of show up at the end of the game. We've seen a couple of young corners kind of flash at little times, but Mike Pellegrino leaves because of the coaching changes. So where does that come from? So we'll get to all that kind of later. Do you want to hop into the receiver stuff now?
Sure.
Okay, give me the names that you brought
Um,
up.
yeah, I
I
mean,
have a good feeling I
obviously,
know two of them.
well, T. Higgins being one of them. I mean,
Obviously,
if they don't franchise him, but even if they do, there could possibly be a trade worked out. Um, so I'm just assuming that maybe he isn't on, you know, available, I guess. The other guy, there's two other guys actually I was looking at. Godwin
mm-hmm.
from the Buccaneers,
Of course.
and Amari Cooper. Now, Amari Cooper isn't your, game breaker anymore. He's not that, he's not in the same realm as some of the top guys like
I'm not sure
Jefferson.
Godwin is either, especially after his injury too.
Yeah, but I mean, Godwin's always that guy that gets open,
Catches the ball.
catches the ball, and he comes up big at big times. We saw that year after year,
Chris
and
Godwin
actually,
would have been so good with Brady. I mean,
oh,
obviously he was
he
when
was.
they beat the Chiefs in Super Bowl a couple of years ago, but he would have been so good if they could have played several years together. I mean, he is like the prototypical. I know we don't have it right now. Hopefully we get back to that point, but the prototypical perfect Patriots receiver. I mean, he just does everything right. He's Russ's type of receiver. He's not flashy, not a diva, gets open, catches the ball, picks up some yards. He does so many things right. I just wonder what that knee injury is going to do to him and moving forward.
Yeah, I mean that's a legitimate question, but he was just one of those guys I was looking at, and the other guy is Amari Cooper, who I like. Um,
Yeah,
I just think he's one of those guys, right? That you know, you put him out on the outside, teams will have to respect him. He's not the game breaker, you know, anymore, but I think he's still really good. And he's one of those guys that will make the other guys at the wide receiver position better, like T. Higgins would, because they will have to, you know, they would have to identify him every time he's out on the perimeter, and he's going to draw top coverage. So it'll help the other guys out there. Um, and those were. I mean, there's other wide receivers that are
sure.
going to be open. But those were the main guys I was kind of looking at.
Similar to the offensive line. I know all five don't play all the time, but you usually have at least five going, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, you have KB, you have Pop. This is super unfair to say without having any background knowledge. Okay, so again, this is just like me kind of knowing personalities and nothing else. I have a really hard time seeing Javon Baker making the team in his second year because I wonder how him and Vrabel are going to clash together. I can see that going great or horribly.
Mm-hmm.
One or the other. I still believe in Jalen Polk. I think Jalen Polk is a good player. And I think he had a really frustrating rookie year for a couple different reasons. And I know he was hurt for a little bit. He fought through it. I think it was mental with him. I still think he's a good player. Now, do I think he's going to be a top 2 receiver? No. Can he be a top 4 receiver? Yes. So
Mm-hmm.
I think KB can be a top 4 receiver too. I think Pop Douglas is the top 4 or 5 receivers as well. So if you have those 3 guys, well, you're looking for the top 2, Steve. And in the top 2, if you can get T. Higgins, and then you can maybe add the cherry on top next year, because we know every single year receivers become available. Maybe you pay T. Higgins this year, draft a receiver in the late round, see how it goes, try to develop the younger guys a little bit more. Yeah, it's not perfect. But at least you have some kind of basis. And then all of a sudden, X receiver from a different team that's a legit one or whatever comes available. Well, if you can take care of your offensive line and you can take care of some of these questions that we have, next year you can trade your first and go get that guy and pay him.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to have the money. You're not going to spend all your money on just one offseason. It's not going to happen. So to me, I wonder if you can add that cherry on top later. And that kind of gets me to the whole like Ted McMillan thing. People have been asking about him and why I haven't mentioned him as much. And I did go to U of A, University of Arizona, and to me, I like him. I'm not sure I like him at 4 as much as some of the other guys, but
Mm-hmm.
to me, I want to add that legit star receiver Like, I think T. Higgins is a low end one, super high end two. I don't think he's like, let's be honest. T. Higgins is not Jamar Chase. He's not Justin Jefferson. He's not Tyreek Hill, but he's still really good. So it's like but because he's going to hit free agency and the Patriots are not great, you're going to have to pay him like he is those guys. That's just how it works. And I just wonder how they approach everything from that thing, because they're not going to have the ability to pay everybody and fill every hole, just like last offseason. But they just have to make the right moves, the smart moves, and make sure they're moving in a linear forward line.
I agree with that. I mean, and again, I was looking at top tier guys because of the cap situation, right? If you say they were able to work a deal with Chris Godwin and Amari Cooper, both of them, for decent but not outstanding money, right? Then your wide receiver in the draft isn't as pressing. You can still take a guy and develop him, but it's not to the point where we have to get one right now.
But if T. Higgins is franchise tagged, which is the rumor right now that he's going to be franchise tagged for his second season, which is Cincinnati's right, which would be surprising for a few different reasons. The biggest one, in my opinion, would be because the owner of the Bengals is traditionally extremely cheap. And if he's willing to go ahead and franchise him, because they're going to have to go ahead and throw a friggin' bag and a half at Jamar Chase, if T's not available, well, then you probably have to overpay a guy like Amari Cooper. And but it's like, is he going to be good with, can we give him 4 years and $80 million? I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know what the number would be. And maybe it's like 3 years guaranteed, 1 year not, or whatever. There's always some phony money up at the end. I'm not sure, but it's like, maybe you have to do that. Take your medicine and say, hey, look, you know what? We want Drake May to do well. But we need to go ahead and ensure that we're focusing on the line. We'll get another receiver in the room. We feel like our running backs, I think Gibson surprised me a bit, but everybody else kind of underperformed. Can we go ahead and get through it, have Drake progress one more year, and then have the cherry on top next offseason when inevitably another receiver comes available, and then you go ahead and just go for it and launch.
Well, when it comes to Gibson, I think Josh McDaniels is going to love this guy because
my God, I think he's going to have a field day with Gibson.
Yes, because the Patriots did not use Gibson enough in the passing game. This guy has always been a very good pass receiver.
I think Gibson and Pop Douglas are going to have monster years with McDaniels and their offense.
Well, there's no reason why they shouldn't. But on that subject of running backs, I like Ramondre Stevenson. I think he's outstanding. But I could definitely foresee him being dealt this year.
I just wonder what the dead money would be. But I don't know. I guess we'll get to that when we can.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of fumbles, and we know he plays hard on every snap, but that is concerning. I mean, when you put the ball on the ground 7 times in a year,
wasn't it like 7 of 8 games? Like it was. There was
a bunch of them in a row.
Yeah. So in terms of positions, Steve, that need help,
almost everyone.
Yeah. We just need to drop off packages, like they're like the Patriots are like one of the villages in Africa. We just need help.
Spend that USAID money right here in New England.
Yeah, there's a whole little political rant we keep going, but we're gonna go ahead and stay, but unbiased here. I think honestly, what I think, I do like some of the younger corners they have, Steve. I like Marcus Jones. I don't think Jonathan Jones is the exact same player he was 2 years ago per se, but I still think he's a good player. We know Christian Gonzalez and what he is. I think we think of him, and similar to what I think a lot of the NFL thinks of him. I mean, he's one of the best, probably five, I'd say, in his position group, which is awesome. I would go. And it's going to come down a little bit to the defense. I would go after somebody in the division who I wanted a couple of years ago when he came from San Francisco. I would go after DJ Reed from the Jets. He's, to me, like, that's the kind of, even if it's not him specifically, that's the kind of guy, Steve, that I would get to pair off Christian Gonzalez. So if you want to give Alex Austin, Isaiah Bolden, whoever chance to develop and see if you get anything from that, great. But at least you have a veteran there who can offset that. Then you still have John Jones, Marcus Jones,
Yeah. Do
as
you
your
think
third and
they're going to
fourth
bring
guy.
back John Jones?
I have no idea. I think so. I think they hold him in pretty high regard in the building.
Well, I do too, but I'm just wondering, you know, if they wonder, is he going to earn the however many years we bring him back for? And right now, the slot guy is Marcus, and they've
I
been
just
using John on the outside. And I like um, your suggestion with the Reed from the Jets. The other guy I was looking at, who's a free agent, that I really like is Carlton Davis from the Lions.
so it's funny. I thought this was gonna be a short show, but we're gonna have to really wrap this shit up. Sorry, Miguel. I'll donate to whatever. Carlton Davis is really fascinating, and the other guy I want to bring up is Jair Alexander.
Yes, another good one.
Loved him coming out of Louisville a couple of years ago. The Packers, there's been a lot of rumors about them dumping him. I think he and Christian Gonzalez would be nasty as a double. Carlton Davis is a very different corner than Christian Gonzalez. Uh, Carlton Davis, taller, longer arms, more physical, stronger. Kind of gives me. I'm not saying they're the same players. Okay, so no one jumped on my throat. Carlton Davis with Christian Gonzalez reminds me a lot of Darrelle Revis and Brandon Browner, where you have one guy who's just super physical, long,
Yep.
tall, can whatever, and the other guy who's a little bit more side to side, ability and agility and whatever. To me, those two look like peanut butter and jelly together. I could definitely see, it would not be surprised. If T. Higgins, Trey Smith, the guard from Kansas City, and Carlton Davis all hit the market, assuming they're going to, I could see the Patriots literally hitting on all three of those guys. But those are all big contracts. I mean, we're talking $100 million contracts for three people.
Yep.
But they have the money to do it. And I think that would be great for the Patriots for a cornerback position. I think Davis makes a lot of sense. And again, I do think his play style is complementary to Gonzalez's because
Exactly.
I can pretty much see Gonzalez going with anybody. But even like Jair Alexander versus Carlton Davis, Davis is, I think, I don't know this for sure. So if anyone wants to fact check me, that's fine. I think he's younger. He's also a different body style. And to me, I think that's kind of interesting too, because Jonathan Jones is, like, I would say, a medium height cornerback and quick and a slot guy. And Marcus Jones is obviously pretty short. So having Davis would be nice because it could pair you with, you could kind of attack that with taller receivers, whereas Jair has battled some injuries and a little bit shorter. And as much as I love him, and I do, I think he has that great edge. I love at corner. I almost think that Davis might be the better fit, even if he's not the better player 100% when he's healthy. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I like Davis just because, he's a very good corner. He's physical. He's big. He's 6'1", 205. So he has good size for the position. And you just, when you see the possibilities of pairing him up with Drake May, I think that solidifies your cornerback position really well. And as you mentioned, they have a couple of young guys that they don't really know if they're going to be able to develop or not. Both, Bolden and Alex Austin, they've flashed at times, and they're definitely worth bringing back. I mean, they're not going to break the bank on you, and you have to have that depth, So
And you know what? I just looked up. They're both 28. Davis and Jair. So they're basically they're same age, a couple months different, obviously. But like again, I kind of go back to it. I'm like, you're probably going to give those guys a 4-year deal, and it's going to be the first 3 years that have some guaranteed money, and that fourth year is just going to be one of those things where they probably don't even see it, but it's going to be included. You know what I mean? But those are the kind of guys that I feel like makes a lot of sense. And I think it's an underrated position because I think it knocks everything down a peg, a little bit. And then it's like, what do you do at linebacker? Like the Patriots just released Taki, and it never really worked out with him, even though I think I don't want to speak for you, but I think we both liked it, as a signing, and it just never kind of latched on.
he was hurt, and he never really got back to his game.
But this
It
is
was
going to be the hardest thing. This is going to be the hardest thing about any player that's drafted or signed by the Patriots this season, and probably for the next couple of seasons, assuming the Patriots don't have to restart again with another head coach. We, even with Bill, getting fired and Mayo coming in, we knew the same off, like the same defense. Like we knew the defensive style, like Mayo came from that tree. Vrabel comes from that tree, but he also worked with Houston. He worked at Ohio State. He was at Tennessee. And guess what? He wants to be a penetrating, he wants to be a penetrating style. It's not a 2-gap system. So do they totally flip up that whole front seven? Like I could see a scenario where, you and I have mentioned, there's going to be 20 plus players flipped out, on this roster compared to the one going into the new season. I could see the whole front seven, aside from Christian Barmore and Keon White, probably one or two guys. Like I could see it pretty much going. I think Juwan Bentley will stay around and things like that, but that's why I think Abdul Carter is the pick if
he's there.
He's there at 4, which is looking less and less likely. I could see Will Campbell being there because he seems like a Vrabel guy as well. But I think Mason Graham, I would put Mason Graham in the defensive lineman from Michigan. I think he is higher in the conversation. People are talking about Ted McMillan. I'd put Mason Graham higher than him, knowing what how Vrabel likes to play. Vrabel wants to play a penetrating style. That's what Mason Graham does best. He can do it all, and he can play all over the line.
And just think if
him and Christian Barmore are healthy.
Yeah, if Barmore
and Keon White.
Yeah,
kidding me? Are you kidding me?
That would be a penetrating defense.
Yeah. I have a comment that I would like to say, but I'm not going to because it's a family show. But yeah, penetrating for sure. Yeah, no, that would be.
I know you're behind the time limit here. One more quick question for you.
Okay.
Do you see them bringing back Austin Hooper, who I thought was really good this year? Or do you think they're going to dip into the draft and look for a younger guy?
I think that's going to be a little bit determined of what they think of Jaheim Bell. I think Henry's staying. As if I want to go ahead and circle back to the beginning of the show, we talked about Drake May on Chris Long's podcast. He talked about how Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper, both great veterans to have in the room.
That's why I mentioned it.
Yeah, I kind of thought so, but I can read your mind just like your wife can, because as we joke around all the time, we basically talk to each other more than our wives anyway. So screw it. But Hooper's interesting. I think so. I don't think he's not going to break the bank. If Drake likes him, he seems like a guy. I don't know this for sure, but he seems like a guy that would fit into Josh McDaniels' offense versus the offense they ran last year. So if Drake likes him, he fits in there. Seems like a guy that is, very likable. I mean, I don't really see what the downside is. I think really the biggest upset or the question would be, what do they think of Bell? Tight end, there's a couple of guys coming out, and we can talk about it before our combine preview.
I'm curious because I think a guy like Bell, Josh McDaniels can find a definite role for a guy like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whether or not they think he's going to be that type of guy, we won't know until they start hitting the field.
I think another thing that I want to mention too, because I just brought this up, and I know we got to wrap up, so I want to bring it in kind of full circle. We talk about a guy like Ted McMillan, and I don't want to dump on him. I don't think he's a bad player. I think he's a good player, and he should go in the top probably 10 or 12, and he will. The quarterbacks and everything, we'll hear the scuttlebutt and the rumors and everything else coming out of it. I think the Penn State tight end, I think he makes more sense for the Patriots than Ted does. I really do. I mean, he reminds me of he's the closest prospect, I think, since Gronk that I've seen. Brock Bowers was a different beast coming out, and he just set some crazy records. But you knew Brock Bowers was a different beast. People forget Gronk went, what was it, 42nd or 44th or whatever the heck it was in the second round when the Patriots hopped over Baltimore when they traded with the Raiders because he had that spine injury. I was there, I was at that school at that time, and I think Tyler Warren, the tight end at Penn State, I think he is the closest thing to Gronk that I've seen, and we've seen what Josh McDaniels can do with tight ends on a lot of different levels. So I'm kind of curious to see if the Patriots were to move down. To me, we've talked about this before. If they move down from 4 to 6. I could see them taking Will Campbell there. That would make a lot of sense to me. If they move down from 4 to 12, I don't even know what who's picking there, but just hypothetically, just stay with me. I could see them taking Tyler Warren because I think he's one of the best players in the draft, one of the most consistent players in the draft, and I think he's going to put on a show, and you're just going to see his hype go up and up and up. And we knew how good Brock Bowers was, and I think he still went low end, middle of the first round last year, and I think you're going to see the same thing happen with Tyler Warren. I'm not saying he's going to set the rookie record for tight ends and receiving yards, but I think he's going to be a damn good player that you're not going to miss on. And I think that something that we've said before, the Patriots, no matter what they do, cannot miss. That's the only thing that doesn't matter. They just need to take a player that can play. They just need as many blue chip players as they can get. And they need to keep doing what they've done the last 2 drafts, which is take blue chip talents and Christian Gonzalez and Drake May. But they also need to go ahead and hit in those middle rounds, and that's what's going to build their team, because their problem is not 11 to 53. Their problem is 1 to 10. And right now they only have 2. They only have 2 in those top 10 that really, really matter. They need to go ahead and keep stacking that talent if they want to compete with Buffalo and everybody else for a divisional championship.
All righty. Well, I guess we're going to have to cut it off here because you're already late.
I know. I've been late since I was born.
So. Yeah, well, I've been with you 14 years. I know this.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, so next week we're going to go ahead and do a combine preview. We can go over the roster a little bit more. I think we have a lot to talk about there. I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. Please do subscribe to us on our YouTube channel and like, share, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. It keeps us high in those podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. For Steve Balistrieri, I'm Derek Havens. I want to give a shout out to Russ Goldman and Ian Logue. Thank you from all of us at PatsFans.com, and we will see you guys next week.